All right. As I'd get in trouble with Tracy, one of my coworkers, if I didn't do that. So I'll do that. And now, okay. Now, let me get this up here. Okay. Okay, so hello everybody. Thanks for joining us for advanced training this lovely Thursday. We have a very interesting couple of guests here with us tonight. So we have Dr. Rebecca Schneider. She's an associate professor, the Department of Natural Resources, Cornell University. So Dr. Schneider received her BS in biology from Loyola College, her master's in environmental sciences from the University of Virginia, Charlottesville, and her PhD from Cornell's Department of Ecology and Evolutionary Biology, concentrating on wetland ecology. She became a faculty member in the Department of Natural Resources in 1996. Rebecca Schneider's program focuses on integrated watershed-based and sustainable water resource management in the face of climate change. Her research, extension, and teaching all revolve around different facets of this topic. Her team has pioneered a program for improving management of roadside ditch networks to reduce flooding, droughts, and pollution throughout the eastern U.S. For the past decade, she has focused her efforts on developing strategies for the restoration of organic matter in grasslands of North America and China to improve resilience to droughts. She has also developed successful companion courses that teach the broader set of ecological issues associated with water resource management. Okay, and then also with us tonight is Dr. Andrew Trelisa. He's he's a visiting scholar, Cornell Department of Natural Resources, and research scholar, College of Natural Resources at North Carolina State University. So Dr. Trelisa received his BA in integrative biology at the University of California at Berkeley, his master's in forest soils at the University of Washington, and his PhD in earth and environment at Boston University. He previously worked in the field of soil reclamation in the Pacific Northwest and no-till corn research in the Midwest before completing his PhD research, focusing on the use of satellite remote sensing to better understand carbon flows in urban forests. His work today at North Carolina State focuses on remote sensing and big data in production forestry, while he applies those skills toward mapping and quantifying grassland soil function in the OGG network with Dr. Schneider. Okay, and with that, I'd like to welcome both of you to our advanced training event. We are the Extension Master Naturalist group. Yep, I'm Amy. I'm the natural resources agent for Johnson County and K-State Research and Extension. So we are very happy to have you here. So you can go ahead and take it away.
All right, thank you. Can you all hear me clearly? Okay,
Yes.
Great. So I'm going to be presenting tonight.
Yes.
Drew and I are partners on this work, and I'll be mentioning some of the work he's doing right now, which is really our research focus. But for tonight, I'll be doing most of the talking, or all of it, pretty much. And I want to tell you, I love Master Naturalist program. So I work with a Master Naturalist in New York State. I usually give trainings on streams and stream ecology and management and on wetlands. There are about 500 Master Naturalists across New York State, and they are the most engaged, hardworking, enthusiastic people. I just love them. And they do so much great volunteer work. So it was really delightful when Amy responded to our request and said, yeah, we could talk to you all. So I'm really, really excited to see. I love to learn something about who you all are and your backgrounds in New York. A lot of the people we talk to are K through 12 educators in environment, sometimes nature center people, a lot of retired people who just always wanted to do nature. So I don't know much about your backgrounds, but perhaps at the end, we're leaving about an hour for discussion, hearing what you're interested in and what you do would be really great. All right, let me share my screen. Okay. Okay, so you should be seeing a screen that has a photograph and says Old Growth Grasslands Network. Is that correct? Do you see that? Okay,
Yep.
great.
Looks
And I'll tell you when I change the page, just so I know that you're with me. Hang on while I move all these video pieces out of the way so I can actually see my screen. I teach 3 classes this spring, and Zoom is always, it's the great thing, but it's also always a little problematic trying to figure out, okay, we got it. All right, so we're going to present to you a program called the Old Growth Grasslands Network that we've been working on this particular piece for the past several, like about a year and a half, 2 years. And we welcome your feedback. This is kind of the first time we've done this with master naturalists out there west. We are here in New York. And so we don't really, know exactly, how much you already know. And what do you think about these ideas we're presenting, and whether there's a role for master naturalists, and how can we do better? So that's what I'm hoping we'll find out in the discussion. Okay, so the talk is divided into 3 parts. It's about 50 minutes of presentation, and then we'll, maybe if you need a break for 5 minutes, we'll take it, but then we'll have discussion. And the first part, I'm going to give you the background context for how we got to where we are. And that's a part where you probably know all this already. I'm not sure. Then we're going to talk about what we're doing with restoring really severely degraded agricultural grasslands and desertified landscapes. And then that's all the context for how we got into looking at grassland remnants, which we call now our Old Growth Grasslands Network. Okay, so globally, the issue of global soil degradation is a very serious one. It's estimated that it affects about a quarter of all the global land area. Those colors that are orange, red, brown are all some severity of soil degradation. And the United Nations said globally, if you gave it a grade, it would be somewhere between fair and poor for the condition of the world's soils. There's a lot of attention being put on trying and working to improve management of soils globally. And there are very important reasons. One is food security. It's argued that to feed more than 9 billion people by 2050, they have to close nearly 70% gap between how much was produced in 2006 and how much more we have to produce. So we need to produce more food, and we're already having problems with the health of the soil. I focus on water. 70% of all the world water consumption is used in irrigation, even though 4 billion people don't have water to drink on a monthly basis around the world. Meantime, we're putting 70% of our water to irrigation. And so we need soils that don't need to be irrigated as much. Obviously, there's a big focus on carbon sequestration, sucking up the CO2 from the atmosphere. And they estimate that if we restore and heal the soils in degraded grasslands, we can actually suck up or consume a lot more of that CO2. And then biodiversity. Grasslands used to be super productive ecosystems, highly biodiverse. They still are in many places, but for all these reasons, soil health is at the core of it. And for me, focusing on water, this photo is taken in China where we're working. When you have degraded soil to grow crops, it takes more water, way more water than if it were a healthy soil. So kind of epiphany for me was finding this out in 2013 about how important grasslands are globally. And they did an inventory of all the world's land use, terrestrial land use, and about 3,900 million hectares of the world's land was forests. About 5,000 million hectares are deserts and glaciers, 360 are humans, but 5,600 million hectares of the world used to be grasslands. That's basically almost 40% of the land surface of the earth used to be grasslands. And more than 90% of that was converted to agriculture over centuries to thousands of years. About 2/3 is in pastures for livestock, and the rest is for cropping. But basically 90-some% of all the grasslands have been converted to agriculture. Grasslands are only beginning to be understood. We've been using them for so long that people have lost kind of like the knowledge about what they are. Historically, they've just been divided into 3 broad types. There are prairies, steppe, and savanna. And when you consider that 40% of the land surface of the earth used to be grassland, it's like logical to say, well, there's got to be more types than that. It's all different climate regions. And I, as a wetland scientist for most of my career, this is about the way we used to view wetlands in the 1970s. They were either swamps or marshlands and considered wasteland. And then as we began to realize how valuable wetlands are, we began to realize there's hundreds of different types of wetlands. We're just starting to realize that with grasslands. They're starting to do more detailed inventories and learning to understand. And I kind of view it as wetlands are at one end of the continuum where you have flooding and the different habitats develop depending on the amount of flooding. And grasslands are at the other end where subtle differences in the amount of soil moisture drive differences in the communities that develop there. And so tons more is happening, learning about what are different types of grasslands. But the core issue is that grasslands are the biome you get when you have semi-arid climates, less than 500 millimeters a year. That's less than about 20 inches of rainfall a year. It's not forests. Grasslands are uniquely evolved to succeed and thrive and be highly diverse in really dry habitats. And this is important because as people have kind of lost track of what grasslands are, all this attention is being paid to, we need to reforest the world, and we're doing a good job. The world is actually greener than it was 20 years ago with huge reforestation programs. But in some places, they're putting forests or trees, growing trees where grassland should be. And it's because we've kind of lost track of how important and how grasslands function. So this is one of the first diagrams that were put when we were starting to study ecology in the 1970s. And it's a graphics of how biomes of the world are distributed relative to temperature and precipitation. And the yellow block you see are the temperate grasslands, and then savannas go down to more warmer temperatures and less rain. But these grasslands are all occurring at less than like 600, 500 millimeters of rain a year. But despite that, even though they're so arid, they are some of the most diverse and productive ecosystems in the world. They support all the different types of plant, grasses, and hundreds of different flowering forbs. Millions of grazers. In the US, it's antelope and bison. In Africa, it's wildebeest and zebras. In Kazakhstan, it's actually Saiga antelopes are finally coming back, and they have now about 1 million of them. They almost disappeared. And then there's all these numerous species of prairie dogs and other rodents and reptiles and birds that depend on them, and all the insects. Incredibly diverse, rich ecosystems with not a lot of rain, not being irrigated. So how is that possible? And one of the key ways it's possible is that in temperate grasslands, they develop these deep organic soils, 1 to 2 meters deep, of organic matter that basically is decomposing roots and the decomposing leaves from all the grasses and plants that form like a sponge. And to me, it's kind of like a cellulose sponge that you use in your kitchen. It rains, and even though it's scarce rain, it holds that water, doesn't drain out, and it's there available for plants to use in between rain events. So it's dry in between, sometimes for a couple of weeks, but water is held in the soil, and that deep profile of organic matter, and that's what kind of runs the show. So those organic soils that occur in grasslands are called mollisols. So there are mollisol soils on almost every continent. This is the green that's showing on the map, and there's the United States with a large green area that goes up to Canada and down to Mexico. They occur in the pampas of South America. They occur all across parts of China, Kazakhstan, Asia, and some in Africa. This is a map of the mollisol soils of the United States. And as you can see, the Great Plains are rich in these organic soils. In some places, more than 75% of the land having mollisol soils. But what has happened and what was documented in the Great Plains, and it was kind of coincidental with the invention of photography, was that there was this accelerated clearing of the Great Plains, and that it was kind of driven by 3 things. John Deere invented the steel plow in 1837. It was called the plow that broke the plains, the sod buster. he invented it, and by 1855, 10,000 of them were sold. They were finally able to break through the root mass of the grasses so that they could clear it and grow crops. Simultaneously, there was the Homestead Act, created by Abraham Lincoln. They basically gave anybody who wanted it 160 acres of land, but the caveat was you had to clear it within 5 years. And then the steam-powered plow was first created in, I think, 1865, and that's a photo later in 1910 taken in canvas. And the combination of all these things, different technological and social developments, meant they were able to clear the Great Plains in a few decades. Well, when you clear away that vegetation, I mean, those dense root mats that hold the soil and the plants that kept feeding the organic matter, the system becomes vulnerable to erosion, to wind erosion, to water erosion. And some of this was also driven by overgrazing and livestock. And that's when we started to become very vulnerable to the 1930s drought, where soil began to blow across the entire Great Plains. So when you clear that vegetation, that organic matter, that surface layer that I call the skin of the earth, that moist surface layer disappears pretty quickly. This is actually from Kenya, but what you see is organic matter is on the vertical axis, and years after conversion to agriculture on the horizontal axis. And basically the amount of organic matter is cut in half within the first 20 years. So very quickly, erosion begins to get rid of that key skin of the earth that was able to capture and hold the rain. It held nutrients for the plants, and so they could recycle. It was a living skin. This is the earliest map I can find of the extent of erosion. A lot of people focus on Kansas, and that area is the core of it, but actually the erosion from the Dust Bowl went all the way up into Canada and down into Mexico. This is actually, the dark areas are moderate to severe wind erosion. Then there's severe sheet and gully erosion. And what you're seeing is much of the Great Plains had some level of erosion happening right after, due to during the Dust Bowl. But it didn't stop after the Dust Bowl. Now, it was the U.S. responded really well. We created the Soil Conservation Service, began implementing the extension to help people figure out ways to start retaining soil and prevent the soil from eroding away. And it catalyzed a whole new focus on doing better agriculture. But it didn't mean the end of all the erosion. It has continued for the next 100 and some years. With the NRCS, the Natural Resource Conservation Service, started documenting rates of erosion. This is from 1982 to 2012, the erosion rates in different sections of the United States. And basically in the center of the United States, from over that 20-year time period, 30-year time period, it's continued to lose about 180 tons per acre. So the rates of erosion are definitely decreasing, but they're not gone yet. So recently, some big things have been changing. So historically, the real focus in crop development was on fertilizers or manure to produce as much food as possible. What they called the Green Revolution to feed the world occurred because they came up with a way to make fertilizer, industrial fertilizer. And so agriculture kind of really focused on the nutrients. So like Cornell, which has an extension, we're the land-grant university, we get thousands of samples sent to us from farmers every year. And basically, it's just how much nitrogen and phosphorus should I add to the soil this spring? That's what the focus has been for almost a century. Some focus on adding crop residues, a little bit on liming, but that shifted in like the past 15 to 20 years. There's been an increase in the awareness of holistic or comprehensive soil health. We're thinking of things like now, maybe we should not be tilling the soil and destroying that structure and the microbiology of the soil, looking at reduced to no-till, using more organic matter amendments and cover crops in the winter to prevent erosion. And Kansas has got a new Soil Health Alliance that started in 1921, I believe it is. The Kansas Department of Agriculture has the Soil and Water Conservation District. So there's a lot of attention in most states to start doing better soil health. And the key in this is that we now recognize there are 3 legs to the stool of having a good soil health. It's not just chemical, it's not just the physical part, but it's the microbiology is key. The bacteria and the fungus that live in an intact soil that's not being turned over and cultivated are key to capturing water, transferring nutrients to the plants. They form aggregates. They help to form these little balls in the soil that actually hold together even in the face of wind and water erosion. And so the microbiology is as important as the physical and the chemical aspects of the soil. There's a bunch of resources. The USDA has a whole soil health center. The Soil Health Institute is a fairly new global nonprofit, and they have a ton of great videos on soil health. And then, as I said, the NRCS has Soil and Water Conservation District offices. So there's all these different groups working on this topic. It's part of what Drew and I and our team are trying to figure out, who is paying attention to soil health and who can we work with in the Great Plains. Okay, so that's the background context for the way we're perceiving the situation of the world's grasslands, that they've been converted to agriculture. Many of them have, due to chronic kind of mismanagement, have led to severe degradation. And definitely would love your input on this. Is this well known? You live out there. Your families have been through, maybe some of you have families that lived through the Dust Bowl. What does that mean? So when we present to other groups, is that kind of like, you know, you can downplay that part. We all know that. Now what I'm going to do is tell you about how we kind of got into the whole topic of dealing with grassland restoration. So that issue I just, described of us having photographs of the Dust Bowl in 1855, which happened in the US 150 years ago, 170 years ago, has been happening in grasslands around the world for centuries to thousands of years. So for example, in Greece, when you go there, it's this beautiful white rock kind of landscape and blue turquoise waters, but there's not a lot of grasslands or savanna around. But it turns out Herodotus in 425 said this landscape is covered with shade trees and grasses. Most of the trees were cut for making ships or to fuel heat and cook things. Much of the landscapes have been eroded, and now what the vegetation there are usually is called frigana. Those are shrubs that are actually spiny or aromatic, kind of like rosemary, drought tolerant, that goats won't eat. And that's what, it's a beautiful landscape, but it's the leftovers of what used to be a grassland type habitat. As thousands of years ago, when we started working in northern China, it also used to be grassland, steppe habitat, semi-dry steppe habitat, and it also is severely degraded. And none of that was documented. So the photographs from the Dust Bowl are like a great lesson of, oh, this is what has been happening around the world. Right now, the pampas of Argentina and Brazil are under incredible pressure, being converted for beef cattle ranching. And that's happening since the 1970s. So the same processes that happened in the US are now happening down there. So we were asked to come to northern China up by Mongolia and Inner Mongolia to help with this landscape and work on restoration. And I'm a wetland scientist, and I get there, I'm thinking, what am I doing here? But it looks like this, and it rained. It rained about ½ an inch. And a week later, it rained another ½ an inch. And we began to realize it's not a desert. This used to be a grassland. And what's happened is the soil has eroded so badly over thousands of years that's 98% sand with no organic matter. It rains, but there's nothing to hold the water, nothing. And so that was what we were faced with. And so we said, well, what can we do to come up with a recipe and the steps for jump-starting the revitalization of this landscape? And we decided we would focus on organic matter. And because I focus on water, we said, well, studies have shown that if you increase the organic matter content, that's on the horizontal axis from 2 to like 10%, you can increase the water holding capacity of the soil. So we're going to try adding organic matter back to the soil. And people have added mulch, manure, compost to soils for thousands of years. But we needed something that was going to last more than like a month or even half a year. So if I put iceberg lettuce in the soil, it's gone like next week. And most manure doesn't last too long. So we said, let's try using coarse woody material that we know will be there for several years while the system can get up and running and try and get grasses growing again. We used greenhouse experiments and microcosm experiments and field plot studies. And we used coarse wood chips that we put into the soil at a mixture of about 5% in the top 20 centimeters. And then we also tried something else that we've been using here to help restore forests where the deer eat all the seedlings. We put a thin lattice of branches over the soil. So our 4 treatments were the control soil. You can tell how really degraded it is. The wood chips at 5%, and we use trembling aspen. There they have, I think it's called silver aspen, Populus alba. And then we did a treatment that was the wood chips in the soil with the branch lattice over top. And then we tried just a surface mulch, just the way we do with landscaping. So this is what we were able to accomplish. This is a plot of 1 month from September 4th to October 4th. This is how moist the soil is, 5% moisture, 10, 15, 20%. The black line on the bottom is that control. That's the soil with nothing in it. And there's a rain event that occurs. The purple line is the mulch, where we just have several inches of wood chips on the surface. The blue line is the wood chips incorporated into the soil. And the green line is the wood chips plus the branches over the surface. And what you can see is that by doing these various amendments, we were able to capture more of this rain event, up to 14%, and maintain the soil moisture for up to a month higher than the unamended soil. And in the case of the mulch plus, the wood chips plus the branches, we were able to keep it up to 10%. I mean, way higher soil moisture capacity. This was so successful that within about 20 months, in the middle of July, without any irrigation, under the branches with the wood chips, we grew moss and mushrooms in the middle of that desert. That's how important organic matter is in the soil. That's simple. The branches shaded and cooled the soil, reduced the evaporative loss. The chips made the soil much moister, and so we had things growing. And by 2016, animals had moved in. We had hedgehogs living under the branch shelters, and we had lizards moving in, and we were starting to actually restore that desertified landscape that you saw earlier. Our team over there has continued to work, and we realized the recipe needs other ingredients when you're working with almost pure sand. We have to add fertilizer, and so our Dr. Zhigang Li, our colleague, was looking at different types of wood chips, poplar, liriodendron, elm, and showing that he could increase the biomass of crops. And then China, food is really important. They said, look, you're talking about trying to grow grasslands. We're not worried about feeding people in 5 years. We're worried about feeding them tomorrow. We have to somehow make these grasslands more productive for food. And so we showed you can definitely improve the yields of the crops. We wanted to start working in the Great Plains just so we would have more frequent access. And so in 2015, we moved to North Dakota and started working with the Northern Great Plains Long-Term Agroecosystem Research Laboratory. Dr. Mark Liebig is our colleague there. It's been fantastic. We picked that site because the climate is very similar to our site in northern China. The temperature regime, these are the highs from both sites, and here's the lows from both sites, almost identical. Mandan, North Dakota gets more rain, but it's pretty close to the same. And the key difference is everything in Ningxia, China, northern China, has to have a drip irrigation tube, everything. And Mandan, North Dakota is not irrigated at all. And so we realized, okay, if we can get the soils in northern China to be even somewhat closer to what they are in North Dakota, so we can get China's soils to look like this, we can actually improve this system and hopefully get it to the point where it starts to be self-sustaining instead of just having irrigation. And so we repeated the experiments in North Dakota. This is the summer of 2015 from June through August. Here's the soil water content on the vertical axis. And the blue line is the control soil without any wood chips. The orange line is the wood chips, and the gray line is our chips plus the branches. And what you can see, our colleague did not believe that we would see a difference, but we did. Rain occurred, about 4 key rain events occurred over the summer. And by having added the amendments, we were able to increase soil moisture content in the soils in North Dakota. And what Dr. Liebig said to us is, listen, we don't need to irrigate here, and we're growing wheatgrass, crested wheatgrass, and as sticking to perennial crops. So what you're suggesting about adding wood chips is not really as relevant to us. Now, if we shift to other types of cropping, we might have to do this. And if you go west of us, he said, or south, this might be a really useful technique. Okay, so that's the background. Now, when we're working in northern China, we start asking ourselves, what are we trying to do? Is restoration the right word? Are we just trying to like enhance the system or revitalize it? I mean, what are we doing? And we need some kind of target. You know, that soil was, we didn't, you know, where are we trying to go with this? And maybe because we were working in such an extreme case, we really started asking ourselves these questions are, well, what's the reference and what are we trying to accomplish? And in the Great Plains, we started asking the same question. And so this photo, which I find so telling, I got out of the Atlas of the Great Plains. It's taken in Roosevelt County, New Mexico, and the man it's pointing to where the top level of the topsoil was before the Dust Bowl. And that is a little blue stem grass growing, and that's how much erosion has occurred in that area. So we talked to scientists working in the Great Plains, and we've talked to different groups of people who don't quite realize how degraded those soils have become, that you kind of start, I do work on roadside ditches. They're everywhere. Nobody even thinks about them. They're everywhere globally. They don't think about what they do. It's just, oh, that just runs the water off the street. But it turns out they have a big impact on flooding and water pollution. I feel like the same things happen with soils. People come to kind of, oh, what I'm looking at must be the right way. It must be the way it's supposed to be, and start to lose track of what these systems used to look like and what their potential is to be as a healthy system. There's something called historical amnesia, which describes this phenomenon where people kind of come to accept the norm, what they see as the norm. So the Society of Ecological Restoration in 2016 came out with a set of principles, and they said, to do restoration, you need some kind of reference system. You need some way, it's not a stagnant goal. You're not trying to go back to that, but you need it to kind of show you what are the important biophysical processes that are critical for a self-sustaining system. So for us, we start to realize we need remnant grasslands. And by that, we mean they've never been cultivated or plowed. Those intact soils with the bacteria and fungi are all intact. And that's what we want to use as kind of like a reference system. So we were never able to find a remnant anywhere where we were working in China. That's going to be a difficult situation. But in the Great Plains, there are still remnants. There are native grassland remnants. Some occur on like the edge of a cemetery, and some in preserves where we're lucky. Railway lines along some of them and old fence lines have intact remnant soils because nobody cultivated them, or they've never been overgrazed. And there are some really well-managed rangelands that also basically have really intact soils. And so that's what we're focusing on with our new program, and that's why we're here talking to you today. Okay, so a lot of people are now paying attention to soil health, and this Dr. Maharjan came out with what he calls the soil health gap. And what he says is, look, in order to know how to manage soils or restore them, you need to compare your current soil with a reference system. And by looking at the difference, you now know what the gap is and what you need to repair or heal or replace. So we did a pilot of this, a pilot test, and we went out to East Nebraska working with Kirsten Kurtz, who was doing her master's thesis here at Cornell. We went to 5 remnant sites in eastern Nebraska and looked at the remnant soils and the adjacent farms. And we are looking at this from a comprehensive soil health assessment. And so now it's kind of like with a doctor. If you go to the doctors and they just put their hand on your head and take your temperature, you can't tell a whole lot. But what they do is they take your blood and they do a lot of blood work and they do all kind of analyses and say, all right, now we know how you are. And if you've been doing it a long time, they have a baseline from you from previously. we wanted this soil health assessment to serve the same purpose. We wanted to act as the remnants to provide a diagnostic system. Here's what the system should look like for nutrient content and pH and amount of organic matter and texture, bulk density, and particularly the biological parameters of how alive is your soil? Do you have bacteria and fungi in there? And that's what we did with this pilot test study. So what we showed, even when literally the remnant was directly adjacent to the ag soil, the remnants had more organic matter, quite a bit more, significantly more. Now, the farm field still had a lot of organic matter, and the farmers were very proud of their crops. They were getting great yields. The soils had organic matter. But what had happened is the soils were much less alive. In some cases, there just was no real activity of bacteria or fungi through the tillage, the pesticides. Even though they were getting good crop yields, they were kind of living off the organic matter that was still present in the soil, and they were fertilizing a lot. The pHs were down a whole pH unit. So the remnants provided a really good kind of diagnostic system and a reference, and we put together what we call scorecards. So Cornell Soil Health Lab does these analyses, and they give you a report on, well, how healthy is your soil, and they color it with, red, yellow, green, orange, and green, because that's, people kind of know that system from looking at stoplights everywhere. And okay, so your organic matter content's good, it's not great, your pH is acidified, your microbial community is not healthy at all. And using this as kind of like the education tool, we can then make like recommendations. What can you do to heal that soil? Reduce the tillage. You can do more organic matter amendments. You can do some liming. And so it provided a really good educational tool for the farmers who knew they were getting good crop yields, but weren't realizing we were detecting the beginning of the signs of decline, that it was starting to go down. You're relying on the organic matter, but it's going to erode. You don't have any aggregates, those little balls I talked about. No aggregate stability. If you cleared the vegetation, this would erode away very quickly. So that's our whole intent with using these remnants as a reference system. While we're doing this work, what we've come to realize, these remnants are way more important than just for soil health. They are, it turns out, in these intact soils are unique microbes that are critical as they do restoration. If you want to see like the liatris, the purple liatris, blazing star, some of the late successional plant species, they are not establishing in like with seeding programs. And the reason is the soils do not have actinomycorrhizae fungi, special microbes, types of fungi that are critical for these plants to germinate and grow. And so some of the seeding programs are not working. It's because, the soil is so degraded, it doesn't have them. And we may need to go to the remnants to get small chunks of soil that get transplanted into these restoration sites so that we can have these different species. So now they become like arcs in a way. These are like the only places these occur. And if you get rid of them, you're never going to get to be able to reestablish these plants. They are also the flowers and nectar for pollinators throughout the growing season. So some of the early studies we've looked at, one from 1930, show that starting in April, there's this revolving is not the right word, but changeover of whole different groups of forbs, of flowering plants. And that's what that graph is, from April to May to June, July to October, different plants that flower and then are replaced by another group of plants and then another. So that and those are 10, 20, those are at any given time, 20 different species may be flowering in a given prairie and then replaced by another 20. These were flower gardens. I mean, it's just mind-boggling to me. It's like, these were beautiful flower gardens that supported all of these pollinators, which right now are in serious decline. Seeds sourcing is a real issue for restoration. I'm fascinated. I have a student looking into the millions of pounds of seeds it's taking to do restoration and where are they coming from? And again, some of these larger remnants may be sources for them. Right now, the remnants may be stepping stones for migrating pollinators and birds. And one of our goals is to create this map so we can see where are the are the gaps spatially where we need more stepping stones so birds can stop and get resources, or monarch butterflies can stop on their way migrating. And lastly, there are many ground-dwelling organisms that really depend on these as their habitat and refugia. And so the remnants need to be protected. They are absolutely critical. All right, and that leads me, this is why we created the Old Growth Grasslands Network, basically starting last year. We have a website that we've just started, so it's very primitive, but we're going to be building it. The goals from the outreach perspective are to develop an interactive web-based map showing where remnants are, or where there's data from remnants that are gone, but here's what they used to have in them. And with data on soil and different aspects of the soil, we have a lot of data on plants, the species composition and the biomass of plants, the litter, the species as they change over the summer. And we want it to be basically a visualization tool to guide people throughout the North American grasslands. Even actually want it to become something that'll spread to South America and other parts of the world, but we're starting here. People need to realize how beautiful and powerful these grasslands used to be, and I think people are forgetting. When we were in Nebraska, we did a qualitative survey asking people at Walmart and the restaurants, did you know this used to be a prairie? It was cornfield. We were surrounded by cornfield. 9 out of 10 people we talked to didn't know what a prairie was or a grassland was, which is what I mean about historical amnesia. It's like we need people to have some way to visualize this. So right now we're building this web and the website and the map. We want to create outreach hubs, and that's why I like talking to you all. People who become aware of it in an area and start saying, oh, we have some remnants, we need to protect those, and here's why they're important, and here's what it means that soil health is so important. We have a whole research program that is going with this. That's what Drew is working on. Right now, we've been summarizing what's in the research literature since 1910. And we have found now more than 300 studies documenting what the soils were like in remnants throughout North America. And mostly it's organic matter. Some have pH, some have nitrogen content. A lot more have plant data. We have lots of plant data. And that's the basis for this mapping that we've begun. Drew is working on now comparing the organic matter in remnants with what the current quantities of carbon are in the soils, and showing the gap, that's that soil health gap in carbon, because that will then help us to, where should we be putting our efforts into healing soils for carbon sequestration? That's incredibly needed. Also, how much water the soils used to hold versus how much they can hold now. So an indicator of drought resilience. Oh, we can improve the drought resilience with climate changes just by improving organic matter content. So that's the whole research component of what we're doing. And the website is underway. We have partnered with a group called the Central Grasslands Roadmap. It's a coalition of several hundred people with more than 100 organizations across North America's grasslands, and like Audubon, World Wildlife Fund, rancher associations, ConocoPhillips is part of it. And they all agree on one thing: we need to conserve the grasslands. And so we took on a metric. They were mainly, a lot was focused on birds and ranching, tribal communities, and we introduced a goal of focusing on soil health, and we're taking the lead on that and working with them. So again, I don't know your backgrounds. I don't know, I've worked with some master gardeners. I know what their interests are. What are the things that we like, where you could, engage if you're interested in engaging? If you know there are remnants near you, that would be awesome. If you would let us come either collect soil samples, or you want to send us soil samples from the remnants, that would be great. And at its very simplest, we just want 3 shovelfuls of soil, 1 foot deep, and give us the top half and the bottom half in separate Ziploc bags. So we have money to do all the soil analysis right now at Cornell's Soil Health Laboratory. We got a grant. It costs about $120 to do all these tests on 1 soil sample, and we have the money to do that. So if you have remnants, we want replicates. So 3 3 shovelfuls of soil is what we're hoping for. Or if there's enough remnants out there, we come out there and we'll do, if you have a farmer who says, I have a remnant, but could you do my farm too? We would do it and give them a soil health scorecard so they can see how their remnant compares to their farm. That is the whole purpose of this. If you have photos of a remnant, like we want to start collecting photos of what they look like when they're full of flowers at different times of the year, or animals that live in them that we could put on the website, that would be awesome. And even just spreading the word. So that's in a nutshell what, let me just see how we are for time. Yeah, okay, a little bit faster than I thought it would take. So I'll stop the share and we can, if you want, and you want to take a break, before we have a discussion, or we can just keep going. Amy, I'll leave that up to you. Hopefully that all made sense, and we could have, so we want feedback. Like the first part is that you live out there, you must know all this, or a good deal of it. We want to know where you think, the master naturalist could play a role if they're interested, or if you know where remnants are. So how would you like to proceed, Amy?
I think we can just roll right into a discussion. We did just get a comment from Kristen Dickerson. She says she has a friend in Paola, Kansas with a remnant prairie. Who do they need to contact?
Mayor
That's
Drew.
in the chat. Okay.
Yeah, and copy Amy, but Mayor Drew, I'll put our emails again in the chat, or
Yeah.
RLS.
I would make the suggestion of Kansas Land Trust, because they buy conservation easements of high quality land in the area in Kansas.
Thank you, Ann. I'm writing your name down, and I'm writing that down. Kansas Land Trust. And do you think they have a website that I could go look at?
Yeah, they
They
do.
do. They do.
Yeah.
And I think, does Missouri Prairie Foundation also do the same thing?
Prairie Foundation is another excellent source. Yeah.
All right, wait a minute. Say that one again. I'm writing.
Missouri Prairie Foundation. They actually own about 40 remnants in the state of Missouri.
Awesome. Awesome.
I think
And
a lot of
they're different, and
tons
they're
of
different.
prairie.
They're different subtypes of prairie. So they have
Yep.
some sand prairies, some low S prairie. I mean, they've got quite a diversity.
Excellent. Excellent. This is what we want to hear. That's great.
Also the
And-
Kanza Prairie.
Yep. So we have some Kanza prairies were very well known, and we actually have found some studies that documented the soil properties there.
Good.
I don't know how old how long ago they were done, but we are definitely, and so Jill, you put us in touch with Jill, who's the master naturalist there, and that's a beautiful photo. Where is that from?
That is from Council Grove in Kansas, about 2 hours, mostly west and a little bit south of Kansas City. So I know, yeah, I mean, is that what you're looking for? Pictures like that?
Yes, it is. Dawn, it is. Yes. And so if we can get like a location, because we're doing everywhere. And so
Yeah.
if we get a location approximate, and if it has a name to the prairie, any information about it, that is what I mean about photos. And if you say, oh, look, we have one from May, one from July, and you see this change over time, we want people to realize how these are constantly flower gardens that, change over time. That's a beautiful photo.
Is this what you're looking for, 3 shovelfuls of this?
If that's a remnant, so we were supposed to be working with Brandon at the Olathe Prairie Center. Oh, they're beautiful. He actually, after talking to us, said, well, you know what? Our prairies are restored, and it takes more than 50 years to get the soils, maybe 100 years to get the soils back to being equivalent to a remnant. He and Mr. Van Syock there said, we shouldn't really be calling these remnants here. So he wasn't comfortable with, I mean, he welcomes us to come take samples, but be cautious about calling these a remnant where you really have that intact soil. So that's, if you feel like, so how do people die? I mean, like a cemetery is easy, right? If you have a tombstone that says 1750, hasn't been cultivated next to it, right? Pretty extreme, right? A lot of times it's people's memory. And if somebody says in the 80 years our family's owned it, it's never been cultivated, that we're working with that as a prairie. I mean, as a remnant. Never overgrazed. We are working with a rancher in Canada, in Saskatchewan. It's been in his family 5 generations. They do sustainable grazing, very low density, and he has, basically one of the most sustainable. He's gotten all these awards and stuff. So we definitely, if you feel like we have the evidence or know it, we would totally love to sample your prairie or send us 3 shovelfuls and just divide them in half. The top 12 inches, take the top 6 inches in one bag, the bottom 6 inches in another bag. We'll pay you, like get them to us, we'll pay you for the shipping costs. We'll work with you. We'll give you the address, what we like to know. Oh, you're going to send them? Great. We'll be ready for them. And we'll pay you for this. And then we'll send you back the data and tell you what it means.
So Rebecca, I want to bring up 2 names for you.
Okay.
Does the name Kelly Kincher mean anything to you?
No.
So Kelly is probably the state's leading expert on remnant prairies. He's
Okay.
with the- he's
Wait a
with the
minute.
Can-
Kincher did some publications. We have one of Kincher's papers. Yeah. Keep going.
He's actually written a couple books. He's with the Kansas Biological Survey, and this is his specialty, and he will overload you with locations.
Thank you, Bill. That is great.
And he knows, Kelly not only knows the public areas, like the ones that we serve in the Master Naturalist program, but also will be very familiar with a number of the privately owned and protected. He's also
Great.
part of the Kansas Land Trust. He's part of the Kansas Native Plant Society. So he's a really good resource. And the other one is Justin Thomas.
Okay.
Justin is one of the he's one of the people who does the formal floristic surveys
Yeah.
on remnant
Great.
remnant environments in both Kansas and Missouri.
Uh-huh.
So between the 2 of them, and then Jacob Hubner at the Missouri Prairie Foundation is the chief biologist there.
Great.
And he would be, is it Jacob? Yeah, I think so. But anyway, his last name is Hubner, Huebner. And he's actually the guy that would you could reach out to get in touch with. And the Missouri Prairie Foundation has a great website. If you go on there, you will find information on all of their remnants.
Perfect. This is amazing. Thank you so much. This is amazing.
I also put in the chat, Courtney Masterson with
Oh, yes.
Native Lands Restoration Collaborative, but I put that in the chat, so.
Wait a minute. So, Drew, by any chance, are you able to take any notes on this? I'm afraid we're going to lose some of this. I'm getting
Yeah, I'm sitting here writing everything down. So thank you.
perfect. Thank you so much.
Also, Mike, they probably need to be aware of KC Wildlands.
Yes. Yeah. So
They're
It is being recorded, so
Okay, great.
probably give you the transcripts when we're
KC
done.
Wildlands helps manage, along with other property managers, the remnant prairies that we have in the Kansas City metropolitan area.
yeah. Yeah, we partner with KC Wildlands and Johnson County Parks and Rec on protection and restoration of native properties, in particular the prairies. And so we have a very active, in collaboration or in cooperation with KC Wildlands, we have a very active seed harvesting and distribution program.
Yep.
We collected probably somewhere between $150,000 and $200,000 worth of seeds last year, and redistributed those. We do some woodland work as well, but most of that is concentrated on prairie species. They also, help us with invasives removal and some of the other activities that are directed at more protecting these environments.
Right.
And then one last name, so Matt Garrett.
Yes.
He's the head of, basically the chief. I can't remember exactly what his title is. Something like resources.
Chief biologist of Johnson County Parks and Rec.
Right. And so Matt is he's a prairie expert as well, and he's somebody who could fill you in on the remnants that are located within the Johnson County park system. There are about 6 or 7 high quality remnants. Some of them are restorations, but a few of them are very pristine.
Excellent.
Because the ground was very rocky, and it just wasn't, and slopey, and it just wasn't good for anything else. So there are some good environments here.
Wow. Wow. This is like a treasure trove. I didn't really expect this. This
I
is
see a
awesome.
question about power line rights of way. I don't think we've ever even thought about that
Oh,
before.
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
So, that's
There
my
actually is a privately owned prairie here. It's called the Cedar Knolls. We refer to it as the Cedar Knolls Prairie. That is underneath a major power line system,
my
and
question.
it's in really good shape. And
Wow.
all these places are right here. They're within 10-minute drive of me. So
Mhm.
Sorry, Mr. Rafferty, would you say that one more time? The Cedar Niles?
yeah, it's called Cedar Niles Prairie.
Creek.
I'm going to add the URL for KC Wildlands. That kind of shows you the remnant prairies that are in the metropolitan area here to the list here.
Dave's another one of our prairie experts in the group.
Okay.
All right, Bill, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yes, my question is, by the way, that's Cedar Creek Prairie is the name of it. My question is, would you be willing to do a soil sample for the Cedar Creek power line right away? What we're doing, let me tell you what we're doing. We are, it's not good soil. We have no idea whether it was ever in prairie, in grasslands in any recent time. Probably was not. But we are establishing prairie grasses and wildflowers there. And we could probably use a really good soil analysis.
We're happy to help. So wherever possible, we'd love to have a nearby remnant so that we can show you the difference and kind of give you, that's the intent, to give you some kind of like a target for what you're trying to improve.
We can do that.
We have money now to do, as I said, both the remnant and some ag land, but in your case, we would do your site. Yes, we're willing to do it. You guys are helping us, and if you can help, and so like if we can come up with enough, we have to call people and get this arranged. We could come out there. So we have a team of students working with us this summer to go out and sample remnants. So that would be a goal, to come out. We're doing a site up in North Dakota, several sites up there. So we have to figure out the timing. If it's, just your one site and one remnant, I would say, all right, let's work with you and just, collect 3 shovelfuls of soil and ship them to us. That's ultimately, that's what we hope to have happen, is people start shipping us remnants, soils from throughout the Great Plains, because we won't be able to sample them all as our team. But we'll work with you. Yes. So I didn't catch the name of who just said they would like to have that sample. Bill, yeah. So Bill, let's follow up on that, and we can talk about when to sample and whether we're going to come out or whether you're going to collect shovels full for us or not. But and if you have a remnant in your mind.
Sample, and between Mike Rafferty and I, we can get I think we can get a good baseline sample from a remnant. Mike and I know each other very well.
Great.
We can collaborate.
Our neighbors.
Okay, that would be awesome then, because then we get a remnant for our website, for our database, and you get a nice comparison of where you hope to be improving your system to. That's exactly what we want to do.
Yeah, actually Cedar Niles, the one that's under the power lines, is only about 4 miles away from the area that Bill's referring to, and would probably make a nice comparison.
Great. That's exactly what we're trying to do.
And that's on private land, so I won't get yelled at by the park people if I dig a hole in the ground.
That's great. That's perfect, guys. That's perfectly what we're shooting for. We'll follow up with emails with the 2 of you, with Amy, so she's keeping track of who we're working with, and we'll figure out when the best time. If you want to collect the samples and send them, otherwise it'll be sometime this summer, midsummer, before we could get out there.
So Rebecca, I looked up your email as rls11@cornell.edu.
Correct.
Is that correct? Okay.
Yep.
I will send you an email.
Great.
And I'll just include the names of the people that I mentioned, just in case
Awesome.
you needed to get the correct spelling on some of them and that sort of thing. But yeah, we'll follow up. This will be fun. I think this will be cool.
This is very cool, and we'll have you take photos and again, anything we can do to make people realize how really special these sites are would be awesome.
We
Mike,
had
who's
another
the,
question. I'm sorry, go ahead.
who is the new person in Casey Wildlands, Mike? You know, they replaced Linda?
Um,
That's somebody they could
yeah,
reach.
I met him. Yeah. Oh, what's his name?
Hunter.
Hunter, that's correct. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. He has a background he has a naturalist background. And he came out and helped us with one of the polls that we did recently, trying to clear up some of the woodland. So
I'll give you his email address as well, I think.
Thank you.
Hunter?
Hunter, yeah.
Hunter Moore, okay.
Yeah. Ginger Werp reports into Hunter, and she's the one that I work with almost weekly in KC Wildlands. And she's the seed team coordinator. She schedules all of the seed collections in the area, so she knows all the prairies.
Cool.
I don't see Hunter's email address, but you have Ginger's email address?
I do.
I think I do as well.
Yeah, I've got it. Andrew, what's your email address? I'll send it to you as well. I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
I'll put it in the chat so you don't have to type it out. It's pretty confusing.
Okay. Okay.
I noticed we had two. Deb brings up is Prairie Center partly a remnant. Wait, can you elaborate, Deb, if you wouldn't mind?
So actually, I think it's a higher quality remnant than Brandon led you to believe.
Okay.
He's relatively new. I don't think he has a background in prairies.
Okay.
And it's Branson.
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 I think
And
Edna-
honestly, unfortunately in that property, it's owned by Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks right now.
it's a
And
state park, yeah.
yeah, he honestly, he doesn't have a lot of people helping him manage it. So it's an interesting, and I really had to dig to find the documents that I found on that property. So
Our colleague Edna Hamera is on, maybe she can comment on it, but because she spends a lot of time.
Yeah, I have quite a bit of the history of when it was taken over, and because of the limestone, hasn't been plowed. So, and it's 300 acres.
So I love hearing this. He said, look, we're just not comfortable. So obviously going to say, whatever they're comfortable with us doing. If you all think it's worth pursuing some more, I'll reach out to him again and mention Edna and Michael that you all have familiarity and feel like the site would be worth, viewing as a remnant or pretty close to it, and we'll go for it. So
It's a fairly diverse. It's degraded of late because it has not gotten good support. A lot of woody stuff that invaded. They're really trying to catch up now, but it's not nearly as in good a shape as it was even 5 years ago when Edna and I and a few others were out there working on a regular basis. But it's still there's still some good plants out there. Mead's milkweed has been reported out there. So
it's interesting you say that, because this issue, in my mind, how critical is that we preserve these sites, and they don't, and so right now they're not really recognized for that.
No,
It's like
not
if
at
it
all.
happens to be part of a park or whatever, whereas they almost need their own kind of special designation or something, it's like, wow, they are so unique. So, and then like the infrastructure bill with money, and so they're trying to get a North American Grassland Conservation Act to fund like activities like this. I feel like we need a funding source to start identifying them, maybe purchasing them if they're in private land, or helping to maintain them. Like, it worries me to hear you say it's becoming degraded. It's like, or like the World Wildlife Fund is doing something they call the plow print report. I don't know if you're familiar with this. I can send it to you. Approximately 2 million acres of rangeland are being converted per year in the Great Plains to crops.
Yeah.
And that means those are the remnants that are going, you know? And so it's like the clock is ticking and we need these sites. And so whatever we can do to start building awareness that it's not just a hobby, you know, like, oh, I bird watch, you know, it's not just a hobby. It's more than that. These are like, knowing those microbes are in the soils that are critical, you know? So whatever we can do, I mean, whatever you all can think of as ways we can promote this importance of these sites, we welcome ideas.
And you know, the Kansas Land Trust buys conservation easements and tries to, you know, they approach landowners and, you know, I think a lot of these landowners are very proud of their land and they've had this land in their families for many, many years and,
Right.
you know, appealing to their sense of pride and they
Yep.
oftentimes know the value and they're appreciative that others recognize it. And
Right.
so, you know, they will, you know, sometimes the most valuable land that's remnant, they will try to get, you know, a conservation easement. I think wasn't there one in Shawnee just down not far from me that was recently purchased? I thought they had that in the news. I can't remember what the name of that place
In
was.
Shawnee?
Wasn't it down near to us? But I don't think the Kansas Land Trust bought it. I thought it was Missouri Prairie Foundation, but I know they're around there. There's a lot of people who still, I was really impressed because I moved here, I lived in Michigan and I moved to California. And when I came here, I was really impressed with how well people really understood the
good.
native ecosystem. And that there were a lot of people who had lived here their whole lives and farmed and they understood the land and they knew the trees, they knew the native species. But I mean, you're right that the people, you know, coming in who grew up in cities and stuff don't have that connection. And, you know, you see so much focus on oceans, focus on forests, and
Right.
there is an underappreciation of the value of the grasslands, and you have to look a little closer to recognize and the value of a weed, you know.
Yes.
So we try to teach that in our messaging and try to get people to include these plants in their landscape. So
That's wonderful. And I mean, that's for me, I've been trying to think, how do you sell this? You know, how
Mhm.
critical it is, because it's not above your head like trees. So it's low down and people kind of think of it as, oh, I mow that. The flowers kind of are the part I'm trying to sell, that there are hundreds, used to be hundreds of species of flowers with changing or rotating, you know, and like California has this super bloom happening because the rain hit the desert grasslands. It's phenomenal. It's like a color painting palette, and tourists come from all over to see it. And it's kind of like, if we could start to create like a trail, the flowering trail that you follow the flowers as they change as it goes north, you know, something like that to start promoting ecotourism around healthy, intact grasslands. So again, we're looking for ways. We hope the website will be a core of this. Here's a remnant near you, and here's what it looks like, and students can go look at it in a K through 12. So ideas, I love how well you all know what we're talking about and know where some are. This is phenomenal. So in terms of what we presented today, do you feel like that's overview is kind of everybody knows the first part out there, or is that really people need to hear about Blue World's grasslands?
Oh, there's, so, you know, I think Edna and I have both been aware, and Edna, I know, has been particularly frustrated by the lack of understanding of the importance of the prairies in the government, in the state government, in the management areas of, so there's a lot of education that needs to happen at just about every level. I mean, you're talking to a group that has, you know,
yeah, we know.
passion in this direction, but
Yep.
we're relatively small, you know, compared to the general population and most people.
I
No.
would say our area, the hot topic right now is natives, in particular,
Mhm.
trying to put in prairie plots in your backyard.
Oh,
That seems to be the real hot topic, because if you we've had some classes that specifically talk about natives and how to grow them in your yard, and man, it seems like the spots fill up really fast. I think what people aren't necessarily understanding yet is the larger picture, the big system of how prairies actually work and how how complex they are, and you know, they just see them as, oh, flowers, but you know, there's so much more to it than that. And what I've found interesting, like I didn't even realize how, like what you were saying about how you can't get rough blazing star to grow without certain microbes in the soil. I think that there's a lot of stuff like that even a lot of us maybe didn't know. So definitely the community wouldn't know. They just honestly would think, okay, once that field stops getting plowed, it can be turned into a prairie like that. And that's just not how it's going to go. So I think there's a lot of room for us on this side to do a lot of those educational pieces, and that we already have tried, and we kind of are going at it towards the pollinator side of things. We really try to get people with, you know, hey, pollinators are disappearing, but I think we could do so much more.
What
Yeah,
would help?
Yeah.
What
tie
could
it
we-
to things
Go
they
ahead.
know. And, you know, I mean, most people still don't realize that honeybees weren't from here, you know, and their limit of knowledge of ecology is a honeybee, and that's totally false. And they don't understand that the plants that they're buying in Lowe's and Home Depot are Asian, and some are highly cultivated and sterile and are of very limited value to our ecology. So, and they
Yeah.
don't understand the concept of invasive. So, I mean, all of these things are so important because all these invasive species are what's corrupting the systems
Yep.
that are left.
Yep.
So,
So Rebecca, on a personal note, I'm curious about your comments on wood chips and cover branches. I have quite a bit of undergrowth, untouched area in my yard, and we have quail
Uh-huh.
that I want to build on this. So I'm curious, does the bagged mulch work as wood chips, and do swamp willow branches work as the cover branch? Or
Okay.
is that just
So
not
what do we,
effective?
all right. Wood chips. In that desert system we were working in, we were working with the woody species that were available to us, which was, they grew these populace throughout the entire country along the road, one species, and that's what we had to work with, and some willow. Now, we've done experiments since then looking at all wood is not alike. Okay, so wood decomposes at different rates. So if I take something like the populace, it's like, and I get it down to like half an inch, it's gone in like about 5 or 6 years. Something like black locust, people actually use it for fence posts because they last for 80 to 100 years. They don't deteriorate. All right. And black locust is almost everywhere. So for us, we've been working on, we need like a recipe of some wood chips that decompose quickly and some that were going to be there in 50 years. So, you know, in that sandy soil, it's not going to get clay so wood is not, all wood is not alike. It varies. But so far, wood is better, and it's coarse wood. So the way I think of it is this. When you have a forest or like an oak trees, it drops leaves in the fall and it drops little branches all winter. And those leaves have lignin in the veins. Now, everybody rakes those away, but the reality is when those leaves fall, if they weren't raked away, they begin to form the architecture of the soil, right? The stuff between the veins decomposes quickly, but the veins stay there, and you start having a structure to the soil that is more porous. So any wood that's coarser is actually helping to create this, improve the soil, both for moisture and structure with more porosity. So different kinds of woods do differ. We haven't like tried juniper, and I know juniper now that I realize it's encroaching all over the West. Maybe it would be a good wood. I don't know. I don't know what kind of effect it might have on the pH or the bacteria. And so, where they're getting, like, if you have local, like our cities, like collect people's branches and then they make big piles of wood chips and people take them, but they're local wood. So if it's local wood that's been ground up and it's, you know, people are using it for mulch, then I say it's probably healthy to put in your soil. It's local. The bacteria and all would be adapted to that area. When we so for example, when we did the study in North Dakota, I brought wood chips out and I cooked them in the oven. I thought, I'm not bringing anything that might big, some bacteria or fungus or something. So I literally cooked them before I shipped them out. But if you're working with wood chips, some species in your community, I think it's probably fine. We use willow for the branches above, just as a lattice, and I think almost any kind would work. The point is to make it shade about a 30% like reduction in the light. It also creates like a boundary layer. It widens the boundary layer so evaporation's much slower. The water doesn't evaporate out as fast. So almost anything would work. What we're starting to realize, and so we're continuing that work many places, because this sun is so hot right now. I'm very intrigued with it. It's like burning when it touches your skin and it touches the soil. That little seedlings just get cooked. Even Dr. Liebig said we're going to need ways to shade the soil. So I feel like the branch shelters are really critical for protecting the system. More and more we need shade. So that kind of is a roundabout way to say, there are things we don't know about the wood chips yet. There may be some, species that would be problematic, but I don't think so. Right now I don't know of any. Our work's been with the populace. We did it with the black locust, elm. We could grow things with elm chips. So almost, I think you would be safe with most things that are growing in your area. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
I would jump in with a piece of free advice on that as well. If you mean to go out and do this tomorrow, and you're tempted to go to the hardware store and get like yard mulch, a lot of that stuff comes out of the like the pulp and paper industry, the timber industry, and a lot of that stuff is a fair amount of cedar and pine bark, and that stuff can kind of chemically suppress microbial activity in soils, especially if you work it in. I would be a little more cautious about that. It may knock down your activity pretty bad for a year or two if it's pure pine or cedar bark like that. But the hardwood should be pretty unproblematic, I would think. Anything you can get hardwood mulch would be fine. Should be.
So Drew, we need to talk about that, because I was hoping that we could use that Eastern Cedar takeover and grind them up, but you're saying probably
it could be fine. I think we absolutely should look at it, but I'm thinking if you're going to work an inch of aged cedar bark into the soil, you can expect some kickback on that a little bit.
Okay, that would be a great thing for the students to work on this summer. We'll talk
Absolutely, yeah, and cheap starting materials too.
Yep.
Have you considered earthworms and things like that? I mean, or beetles?
Okay, so the whole ecosystem, and we're just starting, there's so much. I'm a wetland hydroecologist, there's so much that needs to be done. The earthworm piece is really problematic because now there's the invasive earthworms, and in our landscape up in New York, they are much faster at decomposing organic matter. They're changing the whole soil. I don't do earthworms. I wouldn't know. I mean, I can tell these one that they call jumping earthworms, but I don't know if they've moved out there or what that implications are for this entire phenomenon of organic matter out there. One thing I'm paying a lot of attention to is the fact that you hear about prairie dogs, but you don't realize there were all these other subterranean mammals that were part of the ecosystem. I can find almost no one who can tell me what the small mammal populations were in intact prairies, because cats, of which I have 2 and I adore, have ravaged the landscape almost across the entire United States. I mean, in the order of billions of all the voles, the shrews, the moles. And I don't know, I think the soil porosity, the whole system was really perfectly designed to have, tunnels and all these animals in there. So the bug part, the insects, so all those, the small mammals, that's wide open for studying to understand. And the remnants would be a place where we could study some of that. I don't do small mammals, but I think there's like great projects for young people, and colleges to say, let's figure out what lives in this intact remnant area where there's not cats coming out and killing them every day. Again, I have my cats, I love them, but as a bird watcher, my hobbies kind of conflict.
Just keep them in the house. That's it.
Easier said than done in a rural community. Uh-huh. you've given us a wealth of things to think about. We took notes. We'll be contacting people as a result of this. We'll figure out ways to do soil sampling and work with you all to get photos. It's really, really great. I love Master Naturalists. I think you guys, it's like the enthusiasm and the knowledge base is mind-boggling, right? When you think about it, if every community had Master Naturalists, think of it. Wow, it's really impressive.
We have a lot of members who are, you know, professors and ecologists and people who have a lot of background in the,
Yep.
you know, prior to coming to us. But I'm really excited to see you guys taking this on, because this is something that, you know, I mean, I learned about moving here, and you realize the importance of it, and you realize that there really isn't a lot of public attention to the needs of grasslands. And so you know, and soil health, and you make this point that it's a global issue. And so I think it's fantastic. I'm really impressed with your work and your enthusiasm, and any way that we can help, I'm happy to help out. So
Thank you so much. Really, passionate is the word. Obsessed is, I have 2 grad classes and I put them both, all the students are working on projects on this. It's like, and one's on restoration. I'm telling them restoration is the career for the next 20 or 30 years. It's the science that there's so much that needs to be done. You want jobs, start learning to do restoration. You know, I really believe that. And so, yeah, we have students looking into all aspects of this.
somebody has to pay for it, unfortunately, and
Right.
that's where the problem comes in. Is it's physical work, and you have to pay for people to do it. And if it isn't a priority, it's not going to happen.
So I actually feel like there's a whole niche for, because I had 2 sons who in high school, it's like, oh, they need jobs, and they need like internship kind of jobs, small ones. You could build a whole apprenticeship kind of program for young people in high schools to come out and learn to do restoration. Doesn't have to be full time. I mean, there's, you know, ways you could build this. Vets, you know, who need a new career that's a happy career would be restoration. I feel like there's all these venues where we could build the pool of people who would know how to do it. Again, it's going to take more than, you know, that's a whole nother group that needs to work on that. We have the ideas, but we're just doing, you know, this remnant piece is where we are right now, trying to get this website to be a tool that people can use, interact with.
Okay, Dave, did you have anything you want to say, Dave Shackelford?
No, actually, but I think there's some folks here in the area that would have a lot of remnants that you could work with, that would be really good for you to partner with. I mean, because there's
Awesome.
some real experts in the area.
That's awesome.
Matt Garrett, especially, some of the people that Mike mentioned.
That's great.
And Matt is extensively renovating large sections of park area.
Yeah.
It turns out that prairies that have been restored so far in the parks, the patrons like it so much that after numerous surveys, he ended up getting all sorts of money to go back and restore more parkland, because they kind of decided they'd rather go running or jogging or bicycling along the trails and be looking at prairie versus looking at mowed grass, you know.
Right. Yeah, it
Most
actually became a
parkland, so-
problem. Yeah, became a problem for him out at Dog Prairie, because the, you know, in the graduation photos and that sort of thing out in the prairie, out in the midst of the prairie flowers, it was trampling a whole big
Oh,
chunk
God.
of it.
Oh,
The area.
so we really don't identify where our remnants are because they get too much attention then.
I know. Believe me, we're aware of that as we think about maybe not always having the exact location of a remnant so that the data can be presented, but like a big circle, it's somewhere in here, and here's what the soils look like, but you don't know exactly where, because some people don't want their remnants publicized. I mean, some are preserves and it says Prairie Preserve and they have a website, so it's easy, but we realize in some cases we don't want the exact location put into a website, but the information just is generally here. Yeah, we're aware of that.
Mike, that's kind of interesting that you said that, because they usually say hoof action on prairie is actually beneficial to the overall system. So I know it's not hoof action, it's more of foot action, but
Yeah.
it's something.
Well,
Well,
Amy,
I think- I do think
I
it's
had
probably more
something that-
cosmetic than anything else.
I had something that I had picked, a plant I had never seen on Log Prairie that I had been keeping an eye on because I wanted to go back and collect seed, and went out one time and found a photographer and the family standing on top of it, grinding
Oh,
it into
no.
the ground. And haven't seen that plant back on Og since, so it may be
Okay.
still out there somewhere in another part of Og.
Well, thank you, both of you, Rebecca and Andrew. Thank you very much for coming and talking to us about this. As you can see, we're all very interested. And if you'd like, I can send you the recording of this just so, because I think it might show the comments. I'm not sure if it will or not. But and then we'll be in contact.
Yep.
I'll make sure everyone gets any information that you'd like them to get and all of that. But
That's
I think
great.
there's more to come.
It's very inspiring talking to you all. It's like, oh, now we have a community of people that we can work with. Otherwise, it's just this landscape out there that's faceless to us. And how do we do this? And now it's like, oh, the master naturalists have come through. It's really great. Very, really great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, not a problem. We're happy to be a part of it.
Great.
Okay.
All
does
right.
any-
Bye all. You'll be seeing some of us. You'll be seeing us again.
Okay.
Thank you guys for
Thank you
having
very
us.
much.
Thank you. And send us
Thank you.
email. Feel free to email if you have more questions or have
Yep.
more thoughts.
Yep.
Will do.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.